has the Rachel Reeves EV tax made a real difference whether you should buy an EV or a petrol car? There's only one way to find out. Let's look at all of the numbers. Hello again, YouTube, and welcome back to Just Get a Tesla. And yes, the Movember moustache has gone. Great! I get my face back, but again, thanks so much to everybody who donated the huge amount of money that I raised for Movember last month. It's really appreciated. So, we're not going to talk in any detail about the Rachel Reeves EV tax in this video. I did the last couple of videos on that one, so go and watch those and then come back here. What I want to talk about is what kind of an impact 3 pence a mile actually has on the calculations, both in terms of running costs for an EV and the question of EV versus petrol. So there's only one way to find out, and that is to start digging into the numbers. And happily, I'm a bit of a data geek, so I have been having a look at things. And I thought the best place to start would be for my car and my circumstances. So I can charge at home, okay? And that means that most of the time I'm able to plug my car in and use home power. So at the moment we're paying 19 pence per kilowatt hour. And yes, I know cheaper deals are available. Don't worry about it. We're paying 19p a kilowatt hour. And my Tesla Model Y Juniper does 4 miles per kilowatt hour very consistently, even in the depths of winter. And I think that's probably the fairest time to be looking at this, when the car is at their least efficient. So 19p a kilowatt hour divided by 4 miles per kilowatt hour means that this car costs me 4.8 pence per mile to run when I'm charging it at home, which, to be frank, is an absolute bargain, okay? And I know people who are charging their cars for even less than that, so their running costs per mile are even less than mine. Anyway, the other option, of course, that I've got is when I go on trips further afield, I need to put some power into the car. The obvious place to charge a Tesla is at a Tesla supercharger, and most of those these days, most of the time, seem to be charging around 40p a kilowatt hour. So again, let's do the maths. 40p divided by 4 miles per kilowatt hour means 10p a mile in running costs. That is still good. But what if I wasn't driving a Tesla and I was driving something else and I needed to go and charge somewhere else? Well, very close by my local supercharger, there is a unbranded Tesla supercharger run by EV on the Move, and they charge slightly more. They're at 49 pence a kilowatt hour, so that's 12.2 pence a mile on a long trip. But what if you don't even have access to that? What if you're just driving up and down the motorway and you see one of those shiny Ionity sites at the side of the road? Well, if you just rock up to one of those with a credit card, they're going to charge you 79 pence a kilowatt hour. So 79p divided by 4 miles on this car, basically it's 20p a mile. You get the idea. It costs more depending on where you charge up and basically what kind of road are you on. So exactly the same as if you're buying petrol. You've got to be mad to put petrol in the car at the petrol station on the motorway, because they're going to be charging you an absolute load of money. Talking about petrol, what if instead of driving this Tesla Model Y, I drove my petrol car around there, which is a glorious 2009 Hyundai i30 1.4 petrol with a manual gearbox. Oh yes, lovely car. Not. Anyway, that car does 40 miles per gallon in this weather. Okay, I can get more out of it in the summer, but in the winter, because again, we're comparing like for like, it's about 40 mpg. And at the moment, petrol is £1.35.9 at most of the filling stations around here. So 135.9, we vend it in litres, but we measure miles per gallon for some ridiculous reason. So it's £6.18 a gallon for petrol. Divide that by 40, because 40 miles per gallon, and you get a running cost of 15.4 pence if I was to be driving the petrol car. Okay, so that is kind of the starting point on that one. All right, in essence, my petrol car back there is not cheap. I'm not paying an EV tax at the moment on this. So as a cost comparison, if I can run this from home, which I can most of the time, then it's saving an absolute fortune. But what if we were to add the Rachel Reeves tax onto that? So I've already said that I am at home paying 4.8 pence per mile. So let's add her threepence on. It's then 7.8 pence a mile for me to charge my EV at home versus driving the petrol car. 7.8p a mile is practically half the price of driving my petrol car. So even after the Rachel Reeves tax has been added on, I'm still paying a lot more to run the petrol car than I am to run the EV. And I know there's been a whole load of people on the comments going, you're paying more tax, but no, I'm not. Even with her tax added on, I'm really not. It would still be cheaper to drive an EV. But, lots of people have said, you haven't taken into account all of the other costs. Okay, let's go and do that then. So, let's go out there and have a look at a direct comparison of a car that you can get a petrol engine and an EV. A fantastic car, a dream car, a Vauxhall Astra. I know, it's exciting, isn't it? A Vauxhall Astra. A car that Stellantis will stick broadly any engine you want under the bonnet so long as it isn't diesel. So you can get an Astra in ultimate trim and you can have a 1.2 petrol manual with a turbocharger, or you can have the exact same trim in an EV. And from a cost perspective, when you go onto Vauxhall's website, they want pretty exciting amounts of money to put you into one of these cars. The list price of an Astra petrol, admittedly top spec, is 34,320 quid. Or if you want the EV version, it's 38,530 quid. Now, I can tell already that some of you are going, see, it costs more. Well, yes, it does, but that's just the list price. If you then go on to CarWow, and other cheap discount sites are available, but go into CarWow and put the exact same cars in and have a look at the best deals that are out there. And to buy a pre-registered brand new car, the cheapest petrol one that I could find was £17,995, and the cheapest EV that I could find was £19,220. So although the EV is more expensive still than the equivalent petrol, it's only 1,225 quid more, 7%, which is a smaller margin than it was when it was full price. Okay, so there is a difference, but there's not a huge difference. We're then going to have a look at insurance. So I stuck my details into the Meerkats and tried to generate a quote for both versions of the same car. So the petrol car would cost me £289.50 to insure. The EV car would cost me £373.58 to insure. So again, EV is more expensive than petrol, and in this case, it's 85 quid more expensive, okay? We then come to taxation, because this is something that gets everybody het up at the moment, especially with the exciting new Rachel Reeves tax. But the Reeves tax is EVED, Electric Vehicle Excise Duty. But park that out of the way, because that hasn't come in yet. When you buy any car or tax any old car, whatever, you have to pay VED, Vehicle Excise Duty. And I hadn't realised just how much that was in the first year, because this is where it's a massive swing in favour of the EV. So in the first year, the electric Astra costs you a tenner. In the first year, the petrol Astra costs you 440 quid. That's a lot of money for a raspy 1.2 turbo petrol engine. Anyway, once you get past that first year, then it's the same price, 195 quid, okay? So at the moment, it's a lot more expensive to get the petrol one, but as soon as you've bought it and you've taxed it, then it goes back to normal. There is one more word that I have to mention if we're talking about comparative costs. And I can screech it because it's depreciation. What about the depreciation? And I've had this from comment after comment after comment after comment. God bless you, keyboard warrior types who keep banging on about EV depreciation. Right, here's the thing, okay? The list price of that Astra Ultimate EV is 38,530 quid. And I've just shown you that I'm buying a pre-registered one on CarWow for 19,220 quid. It's half the price. Do not screech about depreciation when you can buy them at half price when they're new, okay? The depreciation has already been incurred. But the point is, remember this, the petrol one was also practically half the price. So do not sit there typing depreciation because it's already happened. If you're paying list price on these things, you've got to have a hole in your head. Mind you, to be honest, if you're buying an Astra, you've probably got several holes in your head as it is. You know what I mean though, right? Don't start banging on about depreciation on cars that you can get for enormous discounts when new. All right, so park that out of the way. Let's talk about running costs. Okay, so according to the manufacturer, the petrol car will do 49.6 miles per gallon. I'm taking 10% off that because manufacturers talk out of one of the holes in the other end of them. The EV claim is 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour. Again, we're going to cut 10% off that for the same reason. So, running costs, all right? The petrol car now does 44.6 miles per gallon. So where we're paying 135.9 a litre, that means that the petrol car's running cost per mile is 13.9 pence. All right. If you're charging that EV at my house, because it's slightly less efficient than my massive great big Tesla, that means it's 5 pence a mile. If you then start doing a bit of a blend on costs, so let's say that 25% of the time you're filling up at Ionity, all right? Somebody like that. So if you blend 75% home charging and 25% Ionity charging, then you suddenly get to 5.9 pence a mile. Now, if you can't charge at home, you're not paying Ionity prices anyway. Ionity are charging you, what, 80p a kilowatt hour. You can get public charging for 45p a kilowatt hour. So cut that down significantly. But I do accept that if you're paying 45p a kilowatt hour and that's all you can get and the car does 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour, it's not going to be the cheapest thing to run. It's still cheaper than petrol though. At least it is until the Rachel Reeves tax is applied. And this is where it gets a bit gnarly. Okay, so if we apply the Reeves tax, and at the moment we're applying the Reeves tax only to EVs, but we'll come back to that in a second. So petrol is still 13.9p per mile. EV home charging is now 8p a mile. Ionity charging is obviously has also gone up again. So the blended cost per mile for the EV is now 8.9 pence per mile. So, okay, it's still a lot cheaper than the 13.9 a mile that you're paying for petrol, but it's got worse. Now, I just said, let's just put it only on EVs at the moment. What they have said is that the road fuel duty that you pay in petrol and diesel is also going up. So it's going to go up 5 pence a litre in April, and then it's going to go up in line with inflation. So by the time we even get to April 28, when the Rachel Reeves tax on EVs is supposed to come in, petrol is going to cost more than it does now, okay? So let's just take a breath and pull these numbers together. I've got a hole in my head and want to go out there and buy a Vauxhall Astra. So I have got a choice. Do I want to buy the petrol one or the EV one? If I want to buy the EV one, up front, it's 1,225 quid more expensive on CarWow. The insurance is 85 quid more expensive, but the first year tax is 430 quid cheaper. So all in all, it's 880 quid more to go out there and buy the electric one, which is a decent amount of money. But then we go into the running costs. How many running costs does my 880 quid actually do for me? How far can I go before I'm actually better off? So we're looking at 13.9 pence a mile for petrol and a blended 5.9p a mile at the moment for electricity. So of my 880 quid, there's an 8p a mile difference, which means it's 11,000 miles before I've recovered the additional costs of the electric car. 11,000 miles. And because you're buying a car from Stellantis, I am almost certain that they're going to insist that you take your EV into their dealership to have its oil changed and its spark plugs looked at and all of the rest of the stuff that it doesn't have, but they're going to try and rip you off anyway because you're going to Evans Helshaw. You're not going to have a good time. The point is, you're going to be paying servicing costs regardless. So we can park the servicing costs out of the way. This is basically just about how many miles do you have to do to recover the money. And at the moment, without the reef tax, it's 11,000 miles. If you put the reef tax on, then it's closer to 18,000 miles difference. Now, I actually don't think that's that bad, except that the average mileage of a petrol car is about 7,000 miles in the UK a year and 8,500 for an EV. So you are talking about a couple of years before you've made your money back. So really, it's just a question of choice. What car do you prefer? Because I know I've been hyping the reef tax up a little bit because honestly, I think the pay per mile, the way that they're doing it, is going to have a negative effect because psychologically speaking, taxes that you can't see don't feel as bad as taxes that you have to pay up front, especially where they think you're lying. So it is going to make a difference, but actually on paper, it's not that bad. Where it does get bad though, and this is a point that was made, and it's a very valid point that people raised on previous videos. What if you cannot park at home? If you cannot park at home and charge at home and get cheap electricity, then what you're going to be paying is public charging. And remember, public charging is 20% VAT, whereas home charging is 5% VAT. So straight away, you're paying more tax to the government and you're paying more for the electricity. And this is where, with the greatest of respect to it, I think we really start to see the difference. So the people like me who can plug in at home, we've got easy access to EVs. The people who can't, they're the harder part of the market that we need to be able to offer a solution to. And the solution is that EVs are cheaper, but they're not cheaper if it's public charging and it's also 3p a mile. And that is just the bit where it starts to get difficult. Look, that sounds like a blanket statement because in a way it is. I am absolutely certain that I could go out there and find some public charging that meant that it wasn't more expensive once you had the Rachel Reeves tax on. But why should I have to bother? Because EVs start to become a faff at that point. When you just get home and plug the thing in, it's a doddle. You don't need to think about it. How many petrol cars can you refill while you're asleep? While you're on the bog, right? Because I get this, oh, I can fill my car up in 5 minutes. I don't give a monkeys. I fill mine up while I'm sleeping. That's when I fill mine up. When do you fill yours up? Oh, you have to actually stand there with the thing. So it's a doddle, but it's not a doddle if you've got to drive around trying to probably compete with other EVs for the cheapest charge point that you can find because that's the only one that you can afford. So there it is. I hope you found the breakdown interesting. I don't think the price gap is anything like as crazy as some of the keyboard footers are trying to suggest. It really isn't that big a gap, but there is still a gap. And that is only going to get wider unless the government either does a U-turn on its 3p a mile for electric or really starts ramping up fuel duty on petrol and diesel. Now, this has happened before. Go back several governments and you had the fuel duty escalator where they were adding a percentage on top of inflation every single budget to be able to jack the price up. that might well happen this time around, because quite frankly, I think this government really needs your money, because I think it keeps chucking it on a bonfire. And no, it's not an EV battery bonfire, it's probably an actual bonfire. But on that warming note, we're going to leave it there. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Which version, stop it, which version of the Vauxhall Astra would you buy? Comments, please. And I will see you back here very soon on Just Get a Tesla.